Hello! What's up? Welcome to this motorsport news channel. Today I'm going to talk about the latest Formula One news that have been revealed these previous days. So let's go. The first one is about Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari improvement at the Canadian GP. Lewis Hamilton outperformed Charles Leclerc in both qualifying sessions in Montreal, where he picked a new simulator-less approach. Lewis Hamilton has refrained from using Ferrari's simulator ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix, and this approach seems to be bearing fruit so far. Hamilton outqualified teammate Charles Leclerc by 0.084s in the sprint and 0.18s in the main session. He was faster in all 6 qualifying segments this weekend. It signifies a remarkable improvement given their overall head-to-head since the 7-time world champion joined Ferrari before this weekend was 27-9 in Leclerc's favor. And out of the previous 9 times Hamilton prevailed, 4 occurred in China. Shanghai happens to be the other 2026 round where the Briton didn't use the Maranello simulator in his preparation, and the Montreal results seem to be vindicating this approach, with a double top 5 result. Hamilton actually reckons he could have done even better. It felt great, he said. We made some good changes in qualifying. Oh man, I was hopeful for a better result, but I didn't get my last lap. The car was feeling like we were improving. I think honestly, if I got that last lap, I probably could have been third. Asked in what areas the car was giving him more confidence, Hamilton replied, "It's brakes, corner entry stability, and just with the setup that I've migrated to, I'm much happier with being able to attack the corners." Back on Thursday, Hamilton delved into his decision not to use the simulator, a tool that he barely used at Mercedes and which hasn't proved useful enough of late, he explained. Firstly, the sim is amazing, the Ferrari driver insisted. It's an amazing space to work in. It's the best sim I've ever seen, and best group of people that I've known, a large team of people that I get to work with there. So, a day at the sim is actually pretty incredible. It is a very powerful tool, and something that as a team we continue to evolve. I think since I've been there, I've had a lot of input in some of this evolution, and they've been really respondent and made loads and loads of changes, and we've just been improving it. With simulation, I feel that the goalpost is always moving. So I started driving the simulator in 1997, the first simulator I would say at McLaren. The cockpit didn't move, but we had force feedback in the steering, and I remember it was at Woking, at McLaren's old factory. And then when it moved to the first real gen, they let me sometimes use it when I was in GP2. And then McLaren, we used it relatively often. Didn't particularly enjoy it because they were kind of long days and a lot of laps. There's a point at which you stop learning when you're doing so many laps, for me personally. And then when I joined Mercedes, they were quite far off with the sim at the time. I didn't use it in all the championships that we won, barely used the simulator, very rarely. And then in 2020, maybe 2021, I started to use it a little bit more. I think there's only ever been really one time through all the years that I've used the sim in these 20 years that the setup that I had on the sim was the exact setup I used in qualifying and qualified pole, and that was Singapore 2012 maybe, something like that. So then all the other times it's not quite perfect. But as I said, it is a powerful tool. I just think since the last year I used it every week and more often than not, I felt you do all the work on the sim, you find a setup that you're comfortable with, you get to the track and everything is opposite. So then you're undoing the things you've learned, some of the ways you've approached the corners you have to shift and adjust, set up that you felt that was good on the simulator is not the same at the track. Sometimes it is, and so it's kind of hit and miss. So I just decided for this one, I'm just gonna sit it out and focus more on the data. So there was just a lot of deep diving on through corner balance, mechanical balance, corner approaches, brake balance, optimizing the brakes, which have been a problem for me for some time. That's led to really good integration with my engineers. It's not a tool that I'm not saying I'm never gonna use again. I think it's something that for sure we'll continue to utilize, particularly on power deployment. We'll see how the weekend goes. But China, for example, I didn't do the sim for China and it was my best weekend. As far as the Canadian Grand Prix is concerned, today's race is forecast to be impacted by rain, which Hamilton, a 7-time Montreal winner, albeit always on a dry track, is content with. I hope that levels us out to the guys ahead and maybe gives us a bit of a chance to fight with the Mercedes," he concluded after Mercedes and McLaren locked out the first 2 rows of the grid at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Now let's go for the second one, which is about the Pierre Gasly's predictions for a rainy Canadian GP. Pirelli's new for 2026 wet tyres have not received rave reviews from F1's drivers. Pierre Gasly has predicted the Canadian Grand Prix could be an elimination game if it rains, with many drivers worried about the performance of Formula One's current wet tyres. Even in dry conditions, the drivers found that they required a second warm-up lap to get their tires into the right window. The relative lack of heavy loading in the tires, as most of Montreal's corners are of a stop-start nature, plus lower track temperatures put a premium on tire preparation. With rain forecast for Sunday's Grand Prix, temperatures are also expected to be as low as 11°C. Drivers have also suggested that Pirelli's new wet tires are too hard, which makes it even more tricky to get heat into them. Gasly, who tried the tires when Alpine conducted a Pirelli test at France's Magny-Cours circuit, was of the opinion that the race could be incredibly chaotic. "I think just the track on itself in the dry, it's difficult to warm up the tires. So, I think in the rain, it will be extremely difficult," Gasly explained. "From what I've experienced, that will make for a pretty eventful race. So I think it's going to be important to see the checkered flag. I don't want to say too much, but I expect a pretty difficult condition if it's wet. I would not be surprised that we end up having a bit of an elimination game. I might be wrong. I've just tried it in Magny-Cours, and it was a bit of a surprise. Let's see what happens." Carlos Sainz expanded on the surprise Gasly experienced, stating that the Frenchman reported the inters and the wets not getting into a range and aquaplaning. Additionally, Lewis Hamilton has been critical of the 2026 Pirelli wet and intermediate tires, having experienced them in a test at Ferrari's Fiorano circuit. Although the wets were initially designed for use without the need for tire blankets, Hamilton says that he pushed Pirelli and the FIA to reinstate their use, but that this is still not enough. Ultimately, they've had to build a tire that works with those low blankets and the tires don't work. So we're constantly battling the tires that don't work. From my test, I've pushed them to raise the blankets. They did it. And from the test, I pushed them to add the blankets onto the extreme tires, which they have. But that's still not enough. There's still a lot of work to do. Isaac Hadjar also garnered experience with the wet tire in the Barcelona shakedown, later crashing after switching to the intermediate compound in the damp conditions, and dismissed the tires as not made for a race with 21 other guys. And now I'm going to talk about other news like the discussion between Antonelli and Russell after their sprint race clash at the Canadian GP. Mercedes drivers move on from a brief flashpoint in the sprint race at Formula One's Canadian Grand Prix. Mercedes drivers Kimi Antonelli and George Russell say they have cleared up their rules of engagement after their fight for the lead during the Formula One Canadian Grand Prix sprint race left the Italian furious. On lap 6 of the sprint, Antonelli attempted to pass Russell around the outside of Montreal's turn 1, which would become the inside for turn 2. But with Russell not giving Antonelli room on exit, the Italian ducked over the grass, leaving him furious over what he felt was his teammate pushing him off. Half a lap later, Antonelli went off trying another move in turn 8, which dropped him behind McLaren's Lando Norris in third, with the 19-year-old's radio fury leading to a couple of interventions from team boss Toto Wolff on the radio. Between the sprint and Grand Prix qualifying, both drivers met with the team to further clarify their rules of engagement as Mercedes aims to avoid a repeat while still allowing its 2 championship contenders to race freely. Speaking after claiming the front row for Sunday's race, both Antonelli and Russell said they had cleared the air over how they go racing. "We had a discussion and we clarified, and now it's all good," Antonelli said. "We've reviewed and we had a chat with Toto and it's all good now." Russell added, "Yeah, as Kimi said, all good. Had a good discussion and we know what we need to do and how we're going to race each other. And nothing's going to change because we've always had that respect for one another. We're not going to wave anybody by, doesn't matter if he's a competitor or a teammate. Of course, we know the number one rule is never to crash with your teammate. That isn't what happened this morning, and we finished first and third, and that's what we'll continue to try and do. Saturday's incident is perhaps best summarized as Antonelli expecting Russell to afford him more room on an outside pass than he was ever going to receive as they fought for a win. Along with learning that lesson, Wolff also wanted to see fewer radio outbursts from his budding star, although Russell sympathized with his mindset after the clash. If I was in his position and he was in my position, I probably would have reacted the same, Russell acknowledged. Because if something doesn't pay off in the moment and you feel like you've been hard done by, you think the other guy is in the wrong. And that's just natural. We're racers, we're fighters, and we wear our heart on our sleeve. We're just in this tough position where everything we think and feel is broadcast to the world. We don't regret anything we say. Of course, maybe you wish you said something different, but we're here to fight. And the last news, now I'm going to talk about Max Verstappen's setup feedback, which didn't follow Red Bull. Verstappen revealed that Red Bull did not listen to his preferences regarding the car setup in Canada. The Dutchman ultimately went along with the team's choice, partly to show that it would not work. Qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix proved to be a difficult affair for Red Bull. Max Verstappen eventually secured 6th place on the grid, but it was far from straightforward. Over team radio, the Dutchman first reported that he could not get temperature into the tires and added that he was also lacking top speed. A lot of things from this qualifying session are very difficult to understand. For example, I have no idea where that final lap suddenly came from, Verstappen reflected when speaking to the Dutch media. Throughout the session, I had very little top speed and simply no grip. As for that lack of top speed, Verstappen appeared to derate earlier than most of his rivals, something for which Red Bull has not yet found an explanation. I don't know. I didn't get any information from the team either, so it was clear that we couldn't solve it during the session, Verstappen said. However, the issue was not limited to tire temperatures and top speed. Verstappen clarified that Red Bull had taken a setup direction that he himself did not support. We did something different with my car, that's what the team wanted. Clearly, that doesn't work the way it should. But sometimes you also have to let the team do their thing and make clear that it doesn't work. I said, go ahead. If you think this is going to work, then do it. And clearly, it doesn't work. That does not sound like a typical Verstappen scenario. Normally, the Dutchman has a crucial voice in the setup direction and the technical team tends to follow his lead. All the more so because Verstappen is not a rookie, but a 4-time world champion with plenty of experience. I've pointed it out so many times already, but sometimes you just have to let them feel for themselves that it doesn't work. Asked why things had unfolded differently behind the scenes this weekend, Verstappen continued. Of course they listened to me very often, but not this time, because they were convinced that it was going to work. What makes that particularly remarkable, if the team was so convinced the approach would work, is that a different choice was made on Isaac Hadjar's car. Verstappen explained, that's because they wanted to try it with me. That has been the case for years. A driver can also say, just leave it as it is because it already feels reasonably okay. But for me, it didn't feel okay beforehand, and it still doesn't. I'm not easily satisfied with a car. I want to fight for victory, not for 7th place. According to Verstappen, it is now clear to everyone within the team that the chosen direction in Montreal was not the right one. It's obvious, isn't it? The whole qualifying session was going nowhere. I always stay reasonably calm about it, but hopefully now they know that it doesn't work. When it was suggested that Verstappen had at least learned from this experience and would not allow it to happen again in the upcoming race weekends, he concluded, yeah, I think that's pretty clear. That's all for now. I hope you liked this video. If so, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe. Have a good day. Best regards. Until the next video.